And we are live. I'm Charles,
This is Emanuel.
and you are listening to
Blight makes right.
the original Legion of Everblight podcast. I almost messed that one up there. Like I was like on the verge of
I
flubbing the
think you
word
said ever Blike. Ever blighted
because I
like.
really, really like
Yeah, it makes sense.
Everblight.
Well, this is a list episode. We're talking about things that we like, and there's lots of good things that we like going on right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We got a man. I love when you start seeing a big meta shift, like what's happening right now um, with the presence of Circle and now the added pressure of what the Scorn lists are doing to the meta. And one, it's cool because both of those lists are really resilient to shooting, and so that helps us in a big way because we don't have a great anti-shooting list at the moment. Like probably the best thing that we've got is probably your Thags list, right? And so it's doing a really positive thing for us where it's making it a lot harder for people to bring a ranged oriented list to deal with some of these big like boogeyman lists.
Definitely.
And so when we start thinking about what's out there, like in the grand scheme of things, we're not too bad into Iona or Zal or Makita. Like these are not our worst matchups. So that's actually a very good thing for Legion. Like other people are prepping for those lists. Those lists are not like as problematic for us as some other lists. So that's overall, I'm gonna say this is a good thing. But it does mean that these are going to be prominent enough that you want to see if there's things that you can do to switch those matchups from 50-50 to like 55-45. Like what sort of things can we do to tweak it? Like I'm not going to talk about Animag this episode, but one of the things we were talking about is like, man, Animag into Scorn is real tasty. I know
Oh
some
yeah.
people disagree, but I'm just like, man, what one unit of Warmongers can do to Immortals on like Animag's feet turn, they're gonna like kill on like fours or something with the strength buff and grievous wounds, and Dark Shroud. They're just like ignore tough, just pop, 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 pop. They're gonna like every Warmonger is gonna kill a bunch of those guys. Like it's ugly for them, which almost assuredly means that they're dropping Makita into you. But beasts also do not really want to face down two units of Chosen and a unit of Warmongers. Like
I don't
that's not
disagree.
optimal for them either. So, but anyway, let's talk about some of our lists. So, where should we start?
I think we should start with your Veil list because you were kind of riding the Veiled train out of LVO, and I remember sitting there in the room with you the night before Masters talking with you, and I'm like, Charles, you need to bring back Veil 1. Charles, you need to remind people why Veil 1's so terrible and, for them. And I think people have underestimated her. It's funny, when we first came back, I was kind of asking about the state of things, and people were putting Veil 1 at like the bottom of the barrel in the faction, and I'm like, what?
I know you're like, wait, what? This feels crazy. This is crazy town. What are you saying? So, okay, so I played a couple versions of Veil, and this is the thing that I've been trying to like hone in on what my Veil 1 list should look like. And the thing is, like, she can run just about everything in Primal Terrors because she mat fixes, she damage fixes. Like, all the stuff is potentially good for her. It's all kind of good in different ways. So it's really going to be about what matchups do you want her for. So the version that I was going to play into Masters, which I actually am like, I was even considering dropping it into Puryear, but in the end, it was just like I have more practice with Callus, and I have very little practice into Protectorate, so probably not the best time to play the list I have the best practice with.
For sure.
But so the rough design that I'm starting with is Veil with Amok, Golab, a Seraph, a Feral Geist, Double Chosen, a unit of Rot Wings, Warmongers, and Gorag, and then the double Hellmouth, obviously. And in big
Obviously.
part, yeah, in big part, what I want this to do is it's got a lot of speed 7 stuff to take advantage of her feet. And now you don't have to worry about having a bunch of enemy models in your feet. It's just all your shit gets to move. And so with Chosen and Rotwings having Repo 3, and Speed 7, they're literally moving backwards as far as they went forwards. And so this creates a really, really powerful dynamic where you're hit and running, literally your whole army is moving backwards 10 inches if you want, or pushing further forwards and ignoring free strikes when you're doing it. So it's pretty impressive. I mean, obviously, you're not going to ignore free strikes on the repo, so you got to be a little cautious of that. But one of the things that I had thought about going into this list was how little I really needed Callus to do in the average game, right? Like he has a feat, right? Like he does that, so you get some extra bodies out of him. And then a lot of the rest of the time, it's either maybe an ignite turn, maybe heal a point off a beast. Sometimes it's a dark guidance turn, and he rarely swings his sword, and so it's just as long as you can, push the accuracy into those, scarier ranges, so you don't have freaking Ravagers dodging away from you, because Iona is wonderful. So the initial thought is like, okay, well, I can cycle Chiller in the early game if I want. That's not quite as good as Dark Guidance, but it gets you, it pushes you into those really extreme accuracy angles, because you got Chosen are already pretty extremely accurate when they're charging. But then if you're just like, well, now I'm at like Mat 9 effectively for the impact attacks, that shit matters.
It matters when they get stuck in too.
Yeah, for sure. And then you make the Rotwings accurate enough, right, where they go from Mat 5 to Mat 7 and effectively 8 if they get the, one of them gets base to base with the target. So you got good shit there.
Go Lab bonus.
Yeah.
Don't forget your Go Lab bonus.
Go Lab +1. So you have that as well. And you've got, you still have Gorag in this particular version. But one of the really cool things I like, because obviously you can't have Golab everywhere. And so one of the things that this list does is you can charge in with Golab somewhere, have him murder some shit, sprint to a different location just to hand out the anti-healing aura, then send other things into that spot. But then when you have the feat, you still get to bring him back to safety, so you can still benefit from sprint. So I really like that interaction. And then with Seraph and Leash, like, it projects Golab really far and makes him super scary. So, it threatens an assassination better than what my Callus list was. And so I like having that additional pressure where it's like, your caster better be stand back, because I will punish you for coming forward, because I will crank the shit out of this guy's accuracy. And then Dark Sentinel, like I talked about in the game that I did play at LVO, and it still does good work. It is still kind of a better version of Admonition in some cases. But anyway, so what are your thoughts going into this? Because like there's still a lot of directions I could go with this. I could drop the Seraph. I can go to a larger beast package, because that is one of my concerns, that I feel like 2 beasts is not enough for her. Like if someone starts going in on assassination and I got to transfer hits, those beasts are going to go down fast. And so part of me wants that 3rd beast, but she's also just so good at supporting the infantry that like maybe they're just better in the list. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
If it were any other theme, I would say that the 3rd heavy would almost be mandatory with her, that she kind of wants to be able to commit one of them and get all of the shenanigans that she can out of it. But this is Primateros we're talking about, and a lot of your benefits are centered around the infantry, and the free models that you get are also centered around that. That being said, I think it's very viable. If you want to add a 3rd heavy, I think it would be an alternate for you to play through once you've kind of got your feels on what you need from the list.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I could switch. So one of the questions is then, how mandatory do you think the Seraph is? Like, it gives the list its only gun, really, outside of Veil flinging spells, right? It's not the greatest gun, but it is another map fixer for some key situations. It's the ability to at least like get Veil up and hit things with Insight, but be able to back her up 2 inches at least. Like it presents that option, and it does really help put Golab in that scary range. Like 11's not super scary, 13's normal, 16 is I have to be really fucking careful. And I'm just not sure like getting him from 11 to 14 is that extra 2 inches just puts a huge amount of pressure. But do I put more pressure in by having some other stuff in the list or freeing up those points? No.
Well, that's a good question. I think that the Seraph also offering Flare is really good for the list, just being able to stack another debuff out there, so that way it takes the pressure off of ever needing to use Insight unless you just really need the damage buff or something, lets you be more targeted. Plus, like you said, for her on her feet turning gives you that escape button, and the way it works a lot of times when you slingshot, the Seraph ends up in front of her, so it also gives you a good line of sight blocker that's kind of playing guard dog for her. So I think it's a viable option for sure.
Yeah, and I was casting Insight more than I expected. Basically, a point in the game happens where the scenarios that I wanted her for, that like, because obviously we're not talking about the Callus scenarios, right? Like Mirage, spread the net, like that shit's Callus all day. But like Recon 2 is a great one for her because it really forces, with all of the hit and run tech, they've got to come into you on your side of the zone because you threat really far and they want to contest your flag anyway. So if they kind of like, I'm going to put like heavies in to try to make it so that you can't, clear. And then she's like, I'm sitting back here. I'll casually catch you in Insight. And anything that digs deep into your forces, like she's kind of hanging back and still catching things. It's just like, if you toe in at the end of your zone, then I'm going to murder you and back up. But if you come across really far, then I'm just going to catch you in Insight. And you can't bring your caster that far forward because if you walk up too far and I can just walk and catch you in Insight and then send a GoLab 16 inches, you be fucked.
You know what else? I think she would probably play in the Champion's Belt really well for a lot of the same reasons. Being able to draw her forces back to the edges of zones, and it's like, oh, you've committed? Well, guess what? I'm going to Insight that zone and just nuke it.
Yeah, it's definitely, man, Champion's Belt's a hard one. It's probably the scenario I played in the least. That was actually the one I was playing against Purrier in. I probably would lean towards playing Callus in that one. I know if you're playing the Blightbringer Callus, that's a real bad scenario for you because it's really hard for you to control both of the rectangular zones. But for my list, it's not so bad.
Agreed.
And it's just one where I feel like really getting up and getting in the middle of the table is totally fine for Callus, and it's danger zone for a lot of other lists. And so I worry, that was one of the thoughts why I did not play Veil into Purrier at LVO, was I was a little worried that the hit and run tech wasn't going to be quite as good with just like how completely centralized that scenario is.
So I played the caster draft at the end of LVO while you were doing Masters, and they used Champion's Belt exclusively for all the rounds for the single scenario.
Okay.
So I got to play in it a lot. And the one thing that I felt going into that was that Primal Terrors has, because I basically played Primal Terrors list with whatever caster that I drafted. And I feel like that list does really good at just clearing zones. It does really good at controlling zones. And when you have the ability to say, like, all right, I've cleared out this zone, and now with my feet, 2 Chosen are going to move forward. 1 Chosen is going to move to the middle of the zone. 2 Chosen are going to move to the back of the zone. Deal with that. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to back it up with GoLab, and Veil can come over here and Insight. So once you've chewed through the Chosen, I can re-clear that zone and take it again. And I feel like because there's those 3 zones, Veil can kind of manipulate where she wants to put pressure, the same way I kind of play Animag. It's like, all right, where did you apply your pressure? Where you put your forces? Because of those 3 zones basically back-to-back across the middle, I'm going to be in the middle anyways. But where I end up putting all my buffs and debuffs, that zone's going to be mine.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely something that crosses my mind. So this is a list that I want to work on. I want to tweak. I think there's a lot of directions with it. Like I'd really like to keep the double Chosen in there because I feel like their interaction with her feet is great, and when they get to like do their thing multiple turns in a row, it's real serious. But freeing them up, like she does make Warmongers better. She makes the birds better. So there's just not anything that she doesn't fix, right? Like she just cranks everything. She doesn't help with the survivability for the most part outside of Dark Sentinel, but she just makes everything into murder machines.
Yep. And so more beef is more murder machines.
For sure. So this is one that I want to put some more thought into, and it could potentially be something that I'm tweaking specifically for Scorn. And so that's one of the things that I don't know exactly how well I feel like Callus is going to play into Makita. It's might be too close to a 50-50 for my comfort. So that's just a matchup that I'm considering that maybe my off list can tweak for a bit more. And so Veil's definitely a thought, because Dark Sentinel could really, really, really hose. Um, and I think like the Golab shenanigans and being able to like, make sure a bunch of shit gets RFP'd on one side and then make sure it gets RFP'd on the other side too. Feel good. Okay, well, do we want to talk about one of your lists?
Sure, definitely.
All right, where do you want to start, buddy?
Well, I'd love to talk about my change to my Thags 1 Call of the Dragon list, because I think it's an interesting change and some of the nuances are interesting. And we've been kind of talking about it since the earlier episodes of Blight Makes Right. So I think for the people who have been listening, they'll kind of follow along and know where we're at. So with Thags 1, I got to play him quite a bit at LVO. I felt really good into a lot of the matchups I played him in. The one thing I did come away from it feeling was that there are two. I had two main takeaways on the list. Number one was that I kind of wanted a second unit in there, some more jam. Just the fact that you have 2 free cards tied up in Incubi, you just kind of feel like a little outnumbered or outmatched sometimes. I remember Will Rutan was talking about watching me play Pagani, or not Pagani, but play per year, and he was like, all the Minoth models were coming at you like a wave, and I just felt so bad because you only had so few models. And it does feel like that, and those models can do a lot of work, and there's a lot of cool tricks in the list and stuff. But
especially compared to seeing like a Callus list on the table or something. Like then you put the Thags list on your table and like everything's expensive and there's not that much of it.
Yeah, for sure. And then like it all has to kind of do what it's supposed to do. So I wanted another unit in there. And then I also felt like in the matches where, because I played it into a lot of the range matches where I was like, this is my range hate list. I'm going to play it into the range matchups and see how it goes. And the shield guards were great. They did exactly what they were supposed to. They were good, beefy models. They were hard to chew through. Like, I had no issues with them in that list, and I could always go back to that list. But I also felt that most of the time, defense 15 against shooting was fine. Like,
concealment matters now. It didn't
Yeah.
always matter, but it matters now.
Plus, with the jam that I play so strongly in the list, a lot of times it's only the long range guns that are less accurate that are shooting at me, and so they're struggling to hit those high defense heavies. And when they are, it's not consistent enough for them to get enough work out of it against Thags to know, like, I'm just going to feed one of those back. Like, you could be doing a whole lot of work that does nothing for you.
Well, you think about it like into the rep matchup, right, with the Trident. It can only boost damage on so many shots, and it really doesn't want to be boosting to hit against heavier targets. It really needs the boosted damage. And so you end up with situations where they're just like, well, let's see how many of these hit, right? And they'll just roll until they hit one, then they'll boost damage on that, and then they'll roll until they hit one. And so it's not nearly as crazy. But when they're like popping with every single shot and then boosting damage on some of them, that's rough.
I agree. I agree. And so I also kind of feel like initially when playing my 2 protectors that I just wasn't feeding. Like almost every game that I played with Thags, I didn't feed because I would be able to spread around the damage early, and then, by the time the mid game to the late game really got into effect, the list has done what it needed to do and the game's over. So I felt like maybe I could let the heavies take a little bit more of the brunt of the damage. And so that freed up some points. Now, taking out the 2 protectors, I lose a free card. But I kind of feel like that's the sacrifice I'm going to have to make if I want to put something else in this list. And it still maintain the integrity of what it was. So
yeah, I mean, that's really your only flexible spot. Like the Hex Hunters are a pretty big deal. And you're not really going to drop one of the heavies, right? So the only flexible spot is the Nephilim.
Yeah, and the ice witches have just been too clutch. Like rerolls have just won me too many games.
Yeah, Puppet Master, real good, real
Puppet
good.
Masters. Trade 3 Puppet Masters. I remember you were trying to pull me back into Legion, and you're like, we have ice witches now. And I was like, that's cool. And you're like, the 3 models have Puppet Master. And I was like, what? And you're like, yeah, it's only 7 points. And I'm like, I'm playing Scorn, where I pay 4 points for one dude with 1 Puppet Master. Seems value. So,
and they're a lot more than Puppet Master.
oh
Like
yeah,
having access to them for the sprays. I mean, I don't really ice cage with them much, but Puppet Master most of the time. But then just randomly also having POW 12 Magic 7 sprays is great.
there have been times where I'm like, okay, all 3 of these are like supporting Typhon, and so one will throw Puppet Master on Typhon, and the other 2 will go ice cage a target, and he's just gonna unload, and just
Yep.
shoot all the guns at it. So
Typhon's like a 27 point package that just has like
basically,
rolls and accuracy for days.
he's basically like I used to play Avatar, like just a real expensive package, but he's gonna get reliable work, and he's good at holding his own. So if I take the 2 lights out and I lose the free card, that gives me basically 14 points. And so I flipped through for a long time looking at different packages I could get for that 14 points. And there were some elements that I wanted this package to add. I said, all right, for these 14 points, I need a lot of value. So I need another unit. I need something that's going to crank up the scariness of the Thunder Dunk. I was like, I am even willing to sacrifice more, beef if it means that the Thunder Dunk gets better. If there's somewhere in here that I'm missing like an extra piece of synergy, I want it. And then I also wanted something that was going to make my shooting package just that much better, because I found playing the list that the 3 shooting heavies just did a lot of work. So
for the listeners, if you're new to this, Thunder Dunk is what happens when you put 2 POW 19s into somebody's caster and they're like, POW what?
yeah,
POW Thunder Dunk.
POW Thunder Dunk. No, the Thunder Dunk officially is when you go and you get the crit slam with Azrael, and then you go for the second reloaded shot, and you're like, oh, I don't have to boost a hit, so I guess I'm gonna re-roll my boosted damage, boosh, Thunder Dunk. I can't. I re-rolled so many like mediocre rolls into amazing rolls just for the rolls of the Thunder Dunk.
Yeah, POW 19s are scary on range attacks.
Yeah,
really scary.
One of the best guns in the game for sure. So looking through, the first thing that caught my eye was the Gatorman Bokar and Bogtrog Swamp Shamblers. So this gives me basically everything I'm looking for in one package. It gives me another unit, and with the 10 Hex Hunters and the 10 Incubi package for the jam, it gives me a lot to recycle, so he's got a lot of food in there. It gives me some corpse denial too. If I'm closer than my opponent is for corpse collection, then I'll be scooping up corpses. And then he has a sweet ability called Hand of Glory. And I couldn't think of a better move to assist the Thunder Dunk than the Hand of Glory. Can you? So, Hand of Glory is a star attack that the Bokor has, and it's range command, so 7-inch range. And he's speed 5, so it's 12-inch threat, 12-inch threat range. And target enemy model hit becomes stationary for 1 round. Now, there's a couple key things here. Because of death magic, he can sacrifice the Shamblers to boost it, so you can get a boosted magic 6 out of it. And then, because of the way Puppet Master works, if you read Puppet Master, it says Puppet Master is a range 10 spell. When it targets an enemy model / unit, it is a magic attack. You can have one affected model re-roll 1 attack or damage roll, then Puppet Master expires. There are not a lot of buffs that affect minion models outside of their faction anymore. So I thought this is really clutch. I can Puppet Master my boosted 6 and hit some high defense targets to stationary them. Even on a defense 16, needing a boosted 10 with a reroll is pretty reliable. And so
that's good.
If I'm going in on my assassination run, this is super clutch on the Thunder Dunk. But any target, really, if I jam with the Hex Hunters, jam with the Incubi, jam with the Swamp Shamblers, I'm getting multiple turns of just all of my guns pumping out range attacks and potentially against a stationary target every turn.
Well, yeah,
Or
and if
just
you
extra board
stationary
control.
like a beast or a warjack, and then your damage rolls take out spirit, for instance,
Yeah.
like then you're just like, well, you're not doing anything next turn, so maybe I'll focus somewhere else.
Well, and speaking of that, so Zuriel has precision strike. So if I don't think I'm going to finish off a target, I can stationary it and send in Zuriel and precision strike out and handle it that way.
For sure.
And then, so the other thing is that even so with the 20 body jam, like the 10 hex hunters and the 10 incubi, I can also jam another 10 swamp shamblers and still probably end up with 20 swamp shamblers on my turn. The aura being over top of the bow curve makes it effective arm 18, which is nice, and it's got all the boxes that it can sacrifice off
He
to the
benefits from
shamblers.
concealment too.
Yeah, he benefits from concealment. So do the shamblers. You know, they go up to def 12. He goes up to def 14. Um, and then I added the Mist Speaker for that last 4 points for a couple reasons. I thought, okay, being able to give it Eyeless Sight is key if I need to be able to stationary something that's behind a cloud, because Azrael can ignore that, but the Hand of Glory Gator cannot. So I want to be able to Eyeless Sight him. I can give magic weapons to my heavies so that they could shoot Menoth Jacks if necessary, so like being able to shoot Judicators
Yep.
or whatever. Summon Vortex, getting that extra cloud, having that like -2 to hit and melee, and also being able to like block line of sight to Thags is good. Fog of War turns its prowl into stealth, so it's basically a stealth solo for like scoring purposes and stuff as well. And then it also has Veteran Leader Bogtrog, so it makes all of the Swamp Shamblers Mat 6. And they have CMA, so I can have 20 of them and getting out there and making little pods of good attacks.
Yeah, even like little 2-man CMAs are now suddenly like Mat 8.
Yeah, Mat 8, PAL 12s.
So it's funny when we were first talking about this list, and I remember us like going back and forth, like, hey, should the witches be a spawning vessel? And you're like, I want the recursion, and I'm just like, you want Puppet Master. And I just can't believe we did not swing around to talking about the Bo
Having both, yeah.
Right? Like we were in that zone of like this list just needs some recursion, right? And we never hit that. And I really do think this is the natural progression for this list because I mean, the jam already helps your survivability, like with your beast, like you've got the concealment against guns, and even if someone shoots a heavy off the table, you just feed it back.
Yeah.
And so you already kind of naturally have that sort of range protection that you don't really need the shield guards. But man, being able to spend 10 points and take your jam from 20 models to like 50 models is crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it's going to force people to blow a lot of attacks, and it's deceptive on the table. Like we were just talking about how when we look at this list, we feel like we don't have an army. We're like, where's all my stuff? But there's 10 models that aren't on the table, and there's another like 20 that are probably going to get created over the course of this game.
Definitely. And one other thing I didn't mention about Hand of Glory while I was on the glorious Hand of Glory is that I noticed playing Azrael a lot that people try to jam him up, especially after they take one round of Thunder Dunk and they're like, he cannot dunk on me twice.
Yeah, there's no more dunking. Like, screw LeBron. We're
like
going to jam him up with Scrub.
Yeah, exactly. Azrael, no, they'll throw high value targets. I've been jammed with a Behemoth before. They're like, literally, I will give you Behemoth so I don't get Thunder Dunked on again. And so being able to just be like, all right, stationary, no free strikes, walk away, bah, Thunder Dunk again. It will be, I think, clutch in certain games. The list just has a lot of interesting tricks it can do, and so I liked that it also added some extra tricks to the package.
Yeah.
Being able to make Thag's Eyeless Sight for the mutagenesis sneak attacks are really nice too.
Well, it also can help. Like if you're trying to go for that twisted form and you don't want to boost a hit, like you could stationary the beast, first, right, and just like stationary that stalker, right, and then you're just like, oh, now I twisted form, no problem.
Yep.
So it does add some like really interesting dynamics there. And man, sometimes that Bo Kerr is just gonna kill some shit. I mean,
he definitely can.
12, right? Power 12.
Yep. Power 12s.
But he's still gonna get some work done.
Well, you can buy attacks, boost to hit, and boost damage with the Shamblers. So he can collect a ton of corpses from all of the Incubi and Hex Hunters, and then just charge into the vacuum that they left and be like, ah. And a lot of times with Hex Hunters, you always keep Bale a little farther back, and so you'll end up losing the 10 Hex Hunters, and sometimes even the 10 Incubi, and then Bale comes in there, and he's the hero of the battle. He's like, tap, tap, two things are shadowbound, and now he's got a backup. Now the Bokur can be like, oh, thanks, buddy. Thanks for shadowbinding those guys. I'm going to town. All the attacks.
Oh, for sure. And you just you can end up having the Hex Hunters charge into something that Jen shadow binds them. So now all the Shamblers are hitting easier. There's so much synergy in there. And Captain Cutter really hit on it in the chat. Being able to double dip and get corpses from the Hex Hunters and then get corpses from the Incubi. I don't think we said it. We kind of talked about hey, it's 20 to 50. That's where that math is coming from. You get a corpse from the Hex Hunter, then you get a corpse from the Incubi dying. So, double dip.
Double dipping.
2 scoops. 2 scoops of fun.
You know what? My favorite thing will be is getting a Heavy's corpse twice. So it's like, oh, you killed that Heavy. I get a corpse from it. I feed it back. Shit, you get a corpse from your Heavies too? Yeah, it's free, man. Thanks for the body.
It may not have a soul, but damn does it have a corpse.
Big old one. I wish you got 3 from Heavies or something. That'd be dope.
Yeah, for sure. Get 10 from a gargantuan, right? Just all the corpses.
It would be like when those videos of when a mother spider gets killed and all the baby spiders crawl out from it. That's what it would be. The Blightbringer dies and you get 10 Shamblers.
See, there should be something if the Blightbringer dies, there's a bunch of blight spiders and blight wasps and stuff.
Blight wasps. Oh my god, we already have the models. It spawns 8 blight wasps.
That would make that real interesting real fast.
Okay, yeah, well, that was totally off the rails and had nothing to do with anything. So
to go the rails we want. This is Blight makes right.
This is true. Blight
is right.
We are tangential.
Yeah. But man, I gotta admit, I really like this direction with the Thags list. I think having Shamblers in there. Have you had a chance to play this version yet? I know we're basically still fresh.
So I got the models this week. I have them built and I have them on bases and primed, and I'm gonna paint them tonight probably. And probably I'd say this weekend I'm gonna get at least 2 games in with it. So you will, by the next time we talk, I'll be able to say, yeah, Hand of Glory. Thunderdome.
Oh, for sure. Well, we'll have to get some tweeting and Facebook action in on those games, because I like the direction of this. And I picked up Shamblers. I forget for what. I think I was going to play them with Callus. I think there was a list at one point where I think it was I don't remember exactly, but I was pretty sure I was going to throw it in Callus because you could ignite them back in Mark II.
Yeah.
And they collect corpses from all your shit. So, but I'm not sure I ever actually played a game with them. I have a full unit of Shamblers painted, but
well, it's funny too. I'm real cautious about who I've shared this list with. Every step of the way, I've kind of gone, okay, what's my theory? Can I practice it? And then I'll talk about it. And so the few people I've shared it with have either said overwhelmingly, yes, this is an absolute improvement, or they've been like, well, not as good as Alexia. I get that. Yeah. The Gator Membokur is not Alexia, but this is Hordes we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Nobody's saying the Bokur and Shamblers is as good as Alexia and the Risen. And I dig the crazy necromancer bitch, and her hordes of undead. Great concept. I mean, isn't that the whole game is based off the Alexia
Witchfire trilogy?
Yeah. Right? That's kind of the beginning of this whole thing. That
of was the Iron Kingdoms. Yeah.
Yeah. But you are quite literally, just as James said in the chat, you are pushing your stuff to the point of how much possible tray space can I take up?
This is true. So look, even before this, with the 2 protector version, I was looking at getting a laser cut tray, and I was like, okay, so if I wanted to fit in the battle foam bag, it needs to be 16 by 8 inches. And I'm like, okay, I can fit this many. So I messaged Brandon O from LVO after our game, and he's talking about it, and he's like, all right, let's do the math. So we do the math on how many circles, and we're like, there's no possible way that this list plus Primal Terrors is going to fit on the same tray. And then I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm adding Shamblers to this list, and he just laughs. He's like,
yeah, that's you're probably making the list the most inefficient from a spatial perspective. Like, did you see the glass or the like plexiglass cases that
I did.
Jaden used?
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, that might just be the route for you. I've been
Somebody
considering
needs to
it
link me
myself,
those.
because it replaces the case as well as being a tray, so that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of convenient. But I've been a little worried with Legion just because like wings take up so much weird space, like, and it is a decent investment to then like potentially not work for some reason.
Yep.
Um, but man, with all those little models, like at least like Chosen and Incubi and Hex Hunters and Shamblers, they're all like there's no crazy wings for the most part there. So most of that stuff should be pretty efficient for like one of those
Just
cases.
Zuriel and Azrael. In my
They're
Harrier.
not too bad. They're not like a
No,
bunch
they're
of
real good.
angels or archangels or
Yeah.
Neriths and Seraphs and
Well, and speaking of list pair, I think this is really interesting in my pair that it, if I'm playing this and I pair it with my Animag Primal Terrors list, which is what I've been playing as my pair, um, it really makes my opponent go, okay, can my list deal with Zounds dudes plus recursion heavies
Zounds.
and Zounds, all the dudes? And can it deal with Primal Terrors and all the beef? Because my Primal Terrors list is just beef. There's no rot wings in it. I bring the Blightbringer, so it's just all the bodies. It's like almost 300 boxes to chew through. But then, does your list that chews through all those boxes deal with Hex Hunter, Incubi, Shambler, Recursion package, and like unyielding
No, for
Thags,
sure.
high armor heavies? And the answer probably is going to be no. So then I just have to make sure I navigate that correctly.
No, honestly, like the Fags game is probably going to start pushing you into the clocking opponents territory. Like
Oh
if you're
yeah.
not just rolling for assassinations with that list, you are. I know that's funny. Like that's not what you're going to do. Like that's totally your Tom Guan list. Let's be honest. Like
Yeah,
you love putting Azrael spear chucks into dudes. Like
it's true. That list is just like, how hard can I push Azrael to the max? I mean, it's everything I ever wanted in a character beast. Like when I it's my
you
Golab.
only say that because you haven't played GoLab yet, sir.
Yeah. I like Golab.
He's
Well,
real
and
good. Azrael's
well,
real. Azrael's what I wanted in Mark II for so long. Mat 7 with ranged attacks and reach. It's like, oh, everything.
and then the tier he gets unyielding. It's so delicious. Um, but I don't want to talk about Golab just yet for me because I have a list with Golab in it at the end of this. If you want to talk about,
Ooh,
um,
exciting.
but you have another list to talk about.
For sure. So I'm actually like gonna go. I've been thinking about a lot of matchups. Specifically some of the ones that like more classic Legion would be strong in, because obviously we've got Cloud Walls coming back in a big way. We've got fucking Blind Feet from Morgul 2. Like I think there's a real possibility like Scorn is going to be present for quite a while, and even if Scorn gets a nerf, which I don't think that they need, I'm not one of those people, but we're going to deal with this for like 6 months, right? And so Scorn is going to be relevant at the Seattle Open. It's going to be relevant at Kingdom Come. It's going to be super relevant for the
Portland Open.
Ontario Open. It's going to be real relevant for Lock and Load. Like sometimes this shit takes 6 months. So being prepared for Scorn is something to think about.
I agree too. I don't think they need a nerf.
Right. I just think they're challenging thing for the meta, and that's
Yeah,
totally
they're
fine.
strong. That's good.
That's why I play this game. I don't want like the easy answers all the time. I want to examine the meta and be like, all right, what do I have that plays into this stuff? And so I think as things develop a bit, I think there's a strong possibility that you're not always going to see the Makita 3 Zal 2 combo. I think different people are going to pull in Morgul 2. And I think a lot of the time, if they've got Morgul 2, that's going to be the one we get. And I think that's the one they're going to drop into Legion. But so let's go back to the good old days and talk about we're an Isla Sight faction. So the beasts are all except Golab, are all basically immune to that feat. fantastic. But we're not playing that many like beast heavy lists. So I've been playing around with some different ideas and, thinking about Thagrosh 2 and like, being able to shoot through cloud walls and, wanting to put work into Gorshade, 4's, fucking dude spam, when you can't get into melee. So again, thinking about some guns. But I was swinging back around and I swear I read this card. And I played my first tournament back to the game. I was playing Absalonia 1. And I very specifically was checking to see if her mutations lasted for a round or lasted until her next activation. And somehow I read round. And I know that's the way the Blightbringer works. He doesn't like have his aura still continue at the start of your turn. But Absalonia 1 does. And I reread it and was like, man, I'm loving the nerfs. They're so good. Like having sprint built in to this beast is just so amazing. Anything that can regularly like boost a nerf effectiveness, I'm like, man, I'm just sad that Absalonia 1 can't cycle her strength buff, right? Because obviously if you play with Thags, right? You're like Draconic Blessing, upkeep it, that nerf murder stuff. Now it's my turn. Thags activates. He maybe smacks someone, puts Draconic Blessing over on a different nerf. Like Callus can do that. Like there's a bunch of casters that do that. But I was sad that I thought that Absalonia 1 couldn't. I was wrong. And sure enough, her buffs last until her next activation, which means they also continue to buff that model. Which could potentially mean that they had frenzy with those buffs. So keep that in mind too. But now that I'm like, ooh, can actually cycle playing God is pretty cool. So it got me coming back. I'm like, maybe my list that I started off with. I don't necessarily think I'm going to play the exact version, but let's talk about the exact version I played in my first tournament back. So I come back, I do this Iron Gauntlet qualifier at Mox because I am a glutton for punishment. I win my first 3 games of this list, having not played in like 2 years. So it was Absalonia, a Blightbringer, a Seraph, 1 Neref, and 2 Angels, with 2 Sorceress on Hellions, 2 Forsaken, a Shepherd, a Pharaohgeist, and Ice Witches. So this was my first time playing with Ice Witches when I started rolling into this, and I was not as good about activating them first because I wasn't used to playing like Beast Handlers or something that activates before your beasts do. So I wasn't perfect at that, but gotten better at it now. And so it does a lot of synergy for the list. And when I built this, I was thinking about cycling Refuge on the Angels so that you can, armor pierce, back away, armor pierce, back away, or like repulse stuff out of zones, back away, kind of as much as you need to. Now I'm not 100% sure I want to stick with the Angel plan, but the general concept here I like. I do think she likes having 1 Gargantuan. I mean, I think you could split it off and run a crap ton of heavies, but I think 1 Blightbringer or 1 Archangel is pretty strong for her because they're immune to grievous wounds at least, so it helps facilitate her feet being stronger. Blightbringer doesn't pose quite as much personal threat, but he does amplify Absalonia's damage output. She can be the Blightbringer can be a map fixer or ignoring tough for just about anything that you need. Also, the Sorceress on Hellions get real annoying when you can just give them concealment or give them +2 armor as you need. So all of those things still playing. So I still like the Blightbringer in the list, but I get a lot of questions like, why the Blightbringer? You don't have any dudes. It still matters a lot. Blightbringer is still a really well-costed beast. So it's actually kind of hard for me to take the Blightbringer out because I like what he facilitates with her. And I mean, she's got a lot of what the Blightbringer wants. Like she's got ways to crank up its mat, increase its speed, increase its damage output, like heal it. Just like she does everything the Blightbringer wants. So in general, I'm liking this. But part of me would like to get 1 or 2 Carnivians into this list because I think refuging sprays are good. Now that the Carnivians wrap 5, I think that helps the spray a lot. It ignores a lot of buffs. It can't be shrunken. I mean, you can't decrease the range on the spray. And so I definitely think there's some good things there. But a lot of the time, Absolonia will have 1 or 2 Fury to spend. And a lot of the time, I'll use her to like heal up the damage that she takes from her own spontaneous mutations. But man, there's a lot of times where I want to do a Spiny Growth. And having Spiny Growth only cost 1, I would definitely like to have that as an option to really crank up her survivability to something pretty extreme. And I also found a lot of the time I really liked having Refuge on her. Every time I started a game where Refuge was on something else, it hit a turn. I'm like, I fucking wish I had kept Refuge on myself. So overall, this is a list that I would really like to potentially play into Scorn. You don't give the Makita matchup a bunch of dudes to chew through. There's a good chance you can still scare an opponent out of playing Zal. And so, obviously you want to play into that Morgul matchup. With access to this many guns, especially decently POW ones, you're going to be able to clear off Immortals reasonably well. But got to fine-tune this list. Emanuel, do you have any particular direction that you think I should go with this? Because obviously Archangel's a consideration too. Cranks up the ranged output, does even more to like shoot through the cloud walls and stuff. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, so let's talk about that. I think that that's an interesting swap in that I really like the Blightbringer. You put Wild Aggression on it, and then it's really easy to fish for poison crits, and being able to charge for free helps its economy even more. She can make it flight and make it faster and stronger. Like, there's nothing about the package that the Blightbringer brings that Absolutely can't just make better.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like the Archangel for one of the things that you also mentioned that makes the shooting package better, but it makes the infantry hate a little bit better because you have plenty of ways to just beat through armor and heavies, and I don't think that's going to be a challenge for you at all. But getting swarmed and locked down by dudes and being able to be like pushed out of zones and not having anywhere to land, like those are concerns. And so having the Archangel being able to just spray down AoEs, put fire out where you need it, and also just clear zones for beasts to get into, it's like, oh, well, I really need to just shoot that thing to death so that my flying, Nerf can go in there and kill your caster. So I think it has a lot of that, plus just being amazing on its own. Plus with flying high, like Abby can sit behind it and move forward and blight burst something, and then it can move over top of her and sit there in front of her and shoot stuff. And so I think there's good synergy there as well.
Well, I mean, a lot of the time she cuts for flight anyway, so that the flying high isn't like super relevant. She can often walk through anyway. But I still like there's a lot of ways to potentially tweak this list. And like I said, I'm just, part of me wants to do because one version I was working on still has the Seraph, and it has Archangel, and then it has 2 Nerfs, and then 1 Carnivian. And so that design is a little bit more of Refuge is going to be on herself, probably cycle playing God on the Nerfs. The Carnavian does cool sprays, gives her access to Spiny Growth, another, heavy hitter. Now, mind you, it'd free up some points if I could take the Seraph out. That would really crank up my being able to murder crap tons of stuff. But I also felt like say in the Makita 3 matchup, everything just casually threatens 13 inches, right? You got Archidons plus Rush, you got Moloch Karn plus Rush, that whole list threatens 13 inches. And so I was kind of worried that without the Seraph that maybe I just don't threat far enough, because she's going to kill, Makita's going to kill whatever she gets to.
For sure. That
shit's dead. So I don't know, how much do you think I need the Seraph in this one?
Yeah, it's tough. It's like you said, threat range is a big deal, especially when you're considering Scorn, because they have so many threat range multipliers. They have so many things that it's like, oh, if you don't respect the threat range, not only do they get the alpha, but their alpha can be so hard that it wins them the zone or it wins them the turn. And so I think that's pretty clutch. Plus, I like Flare again here, outside of Wild Aggression, just being able to have another gun that also gives -2 defense is really good.
Yeah, like I said, part of this is that I'd really like to cram as much work into the list as possible. obviously you need some solos, but if this is going to be paired with my Callus list or even potentially Veil, I don't necessarily need it for Mirage, which means that I don't necessarily have to have a bunch of solos. So, I could cut down to one Blightedness, Sorceress, and Hellion, get the other Forsaken for free. That frees up 4 points. I could even potential drop the Feral Geist to free up, another 2 points. That gets me to 6 points. And then if the Seraph goes down to a Nerif, there I've got 8 more points to potentially be tweaking stuff. That's starting at the point I could toss in a Naga if I wanted. But it's all very interesting. There's a lot of options here, but the question is I'm getting kind of used to playing all the infantry. So going back to a classic Mark II list with refuging beasts, being I need to be careful not to lose shit. I think you may have muted yourself, sir.
I sure did. And I was basically saying it's really funny because there was a time where you're like, infantry? I don't play that. That's an Emanuel thing.
Yeah. Infantry is just that's just giving your opponents corpses and shit. Playing infantry is just making their army work better.
You were like, I don't like this lack of boosting mechanics. Not good enough.
Yeah, it's it's pretty relaxing playing Callus to a certain extent because you're especially in my version of the list, I'm if you dice spike and you murder something, I don't care. I've got so much shit. You don't have enough time to kill my whole army anyway. I don't care. But this one,
Blue-black mill.
Contrast. If I pair this with Callus, being able to you have to kill all the infantry. Can you also play against classic Mark II Legion?
And kill all the beasts twice, basically, because healing. Or kill them so completely it's not relevant.
It does force people to either not come in or really dedicate. So that, the feat is one of those feats that can benefit you even if you never get a good use out of it. It changes how your opponents play.
You're like, and I get a time walk this turn because you didn't kill anything?
All right. So let's talk about the key point. Angels. Do they stay in? Obviously, if Scorn is one of the main matchups that I would potentially want to play this into, Angels can't repulse Immortals out of zones. So that's something to think about. But Angels are real good at killing Sentinels and killing Sentinels and Immortals because, if you've only, if the Immortals are defense 13, then it's a little harder for an Angel to do the overtake shenanigans, right? Because probably aren't going to kill that many.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Angels stay in or Angels go out?
I think it's time for them to come out. As much as I love the Repulse and I love Refuge with them and I love the Armor Pierce, I don't know that it's enough work in this meta. Like you said, you're trying to fill it with lots of work, and I just don't know that they... without 2 of them, what is that? Freaking 20-something point and 30-something point sync of maybe they both work together to kill a heavy this turn. Or maybe collectively they killed 8 infantry. I don't think that's enough work in this meta.
It's entirely possible. Angels feel a bit overcosted at the moment. I could easily see them being 15 points. At 17, I think it's tough. I like what they bring, because especially late in the game, having access to Repulse is good. But I often feel Angels at mat 6 and just one big Armor Pierce, even with Refuge, I wonder if they are going to be able to do enough. Now, remember back in the day, just having a real dependability of being able to send 2 Angels in with Refuge and just Armor Pierce, murder, backup. Armor Pierce, murder, backup. And getting to take something for free, it's still nice.
But yeah, I don't disagree. It's just finding those premium targets is a lot harder than it used to be.
Yeah, there's a lot more shit in lists. So
there's just more on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, taking one heavy off the table does not mean what it used to mean.
Or just even being able to get access to that heavy in a reasonable amount of time to, things are just behind lines more.
It's the versatility of them that I always liked. Having an overtake heavy, At POW 14 at least, that's something that even like decently armored troops, POW 14s, are something that usually kills casually outside of like sentinels with mini feats, right? POW 14 is still pretty good. I mean, man, did I hate Bane Knights with +5 armor. But
So do a lot of people.
yeah, it's like, we didn't get a like mention running into Chiriboga at Las Vegas Open.
I
Like
love that guy.
seeing that guy again
Missed
was
him.
great. But it brings up horrible memories of 30 Bane Knights and 20 Mechanothralls and Necrosurgeons and just dudes for days
I
and days and days.
I studied deep under his banner. I don't know if you remember, but back in Mark II, man, when I was on the Crixwagon, me and Charaboga were like this.
Yeah.
I was flying down to Dallas and seeing him all the time, and he was like, so, now that you've played 30 Banes, how about adding 20 Mechanothralls? And I'm like, okay, I like where you're going with this. And he's like, okay, now, after you've played it a few times, see if you're not just screaming from having to stand over the table and move all of those dudes. And I was like, okay. But he's like, watch what happens to your opponent.
Yeah. It may be hell on your back, but it's hell on their mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
So much work.
So this is the list that I'm currently going into. Like, I want to try like a beast heavy version. And like I said, I think Absalonia 1 and Thagrosh 2 are kind of like at the top of my list of things that I think could potentially do that very well. I also like with Angels, and I don't want to go too melee heavy. I don't want it to be like just Nerf spam because I really want to be able to shoot through cloud walls and pick off troops early, or like, and so just having the Angel guns or Carnivian guns, like I want to be able to do some solid work. So I don't know. Maybe I should consider it with Vale as well. Like, I mean, she can still back everybody up, for a turn. But it'll be weird putting Carnivians on the table and have them be speed 5. Not used to that shit. I'm not really used to putting Carnivians on the table. Let's be honest. But I think 1-cost Spiny Growth has been real appealing for these midline casters. So that seems good. Well, we got time to talk about another list. What else have you been working on?
So I do have one last list we can try to squeeze in here, and I don't know that my list is all that surprising, but I think it's interesting in that it's following along the thought process. So when we were at LVO, you and I talked a lot about how amazing GoLab was, but then again, you haven't shut up about GoLab for like months.
GoLab is the best character War Beast in the game. Might be the best character Beast or Jack. I don't know. I will stand on my statement that I believe that GoLab is the best character beast in the game. I would need more conversation regarding the Warjacks in comparison. But GoLab's fucking amazing.
He's real good. And I'm not using him at all. Like, I'm playing Children of the Dragon, and in my Primal Terrors list, playing a Blightbringer. And so I've put him on the table once. Like, he's still sitting on my shelf. I haven't even finished painting him yet. And it just seems like a travesty that we have the best character beast in the game, and I just am not using it. So I was like, I'm going to build a list that tries to abuse GoLab and see what I can come out of it. And one thing that was kind of a takeaway from LVO was that I really liked defense 15. I felt like that was a really good margin for the where like math starts to fall off in weird places. And so looking through, I came and settled on Fayana because I feel like she offers a lot to being able to play the Primal Terrors theme and get access to GoLab and just crank him up to all kinds of absurd nonsense. I think that just taking all of the Ogren up to defense 15, like that plus an armor buff, can make them absurdly hard to remove. Because now you're talking about having high accuracy, high power weapons that can also chew through multiple boxes. And I like that. I like the Hellmouths can drag things in for her. I like that she has Fury, so she can crank up the damage output of everything pretty close to Animag. She has Iron Flesh, so she can crank up the armor, so she doesn't necessarily have to rely on having the Blightbringer. And then GoLab offering Fayana Sprint means she can also do work. I also like admonition on Golab because you can get him up to defense 16 with the feet and then admonition and just put him in really absurd places, and just be like, you're probably not going to kill him. I mean, you can try, but you're probably not going to kill him. And then I also have a rake in the list. So to give you the full list, it's Fayana, Amok, Golab, Neref, a rake, Warmonger, Warchief, Spell Martyr, Gremlin Swarm, 2 Hellmouths, 2 Chosen units, Warmongers, and Rotten Eye. And I really like this list because it also puts a lot of assassination pressure on. And if I were going to pair this with something like Animag, where I wanted just easy for my tray, like 2 Primal Terrorist lists, not a whole lot I have to bring extra, just put Golab and a Nerf and a Rake on there, and I can call it good. I like that this list would also bring my assassination pressure because you can put the super defense rake with admonition or fury on it way in bad positions for your opponent and just be like, if you can't deal with it, it's going to kill your caster next turn. And then they can spend a lot of time just trying to deal with this 8-point model whose defense 18, stealth, boxes, and admonition. And not only can they just clock themselves on trying to unpack all of that, but it's only 8 points. Like, if you're going to spend all of that work trying to deal with an 8-point model against Primal Terrors, you're probably not doing enough work elsewhere.
It's a cool list. I mean, I like the idea of doing Fayana in Primal Terrors. I think it doesn't skew as hard on the defense, but doesn't necessarily need to. I think when you've got decent armor and you put the defense to kind of an obnoxious point, not necessarily like a earth-shattering 17 or 18 in every case, but just getting into 15s and 16s.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's potentially real good.
Yep, especially getting everything up to high defense means that some of the other high defense things will get ignored because, you only have so many accurate things and so many accuracy fixers in any given list. And when everything goes up to high defense, but then you have some things that are absurd high defense, you're like, all right, well, I have to deal with the defense 15 chosen. Like, that's a problem this turn. But then you're like, that Nerf right behind him, he's even higher defense and he's probably harder to deal with. I'm going to just leave him alone. And as many of your opponents have learned, not dealing with the Nerf is a mistake.
Oh, for sure. Like, Nerfs are so good at 12 points. Like, this was a
Yeah.
discussion that I had with Pagani, and we were both like, why is the Nerf mat 7? Like, that is a totally extra mat that's just like a gift. That's like a Blight Makes Right mat. It's just like, why is the Nerf mat 7? Blight Makes Right.
Yep, just because, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of emphasizes the beast package in this list. It's only Golab, Nerf, and the Rake, but all 3 of them are really undercosted for how much work you can get out of them and all the cool things that they do and bring to the list. I also like giving Phaon countercharge, just being able to like baby camp on a flag and be like, oh, you got too close to this flag. Phaon dunk!
Yeah. Phaon dunk. She
It's
needs a
funny.
better dunk name, though, like Chain Dunk or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I have still never played a game with Fiona 2. I started I picked her up shortly after she came out, like when I wasn't playing in Mark III really, but I was like kind of thinking about it. And I picked her up and painted her, and I painted Proteus at the same time, but I've still never played a game with her.
She's high up on my list. She's a Hamilton sculpt, so I'm really happy about that. Plus,
Hamilton Holidays.
Hamilton Holidays. It was a gift, when I was first getting back in the Legion. Fiona was a gift, and so I want to do her justice.
Yeah, and so are you thinking that list goes with Thags or does it go with Animag? What are you thinking?
Honestly, it could go with either. It kind of rides the line right between. So if I feel like where I'm at with Thags and where I'm at with Animag is they're both good enough for me to be like a main list. And there's just some meta read there. But if I feel like I don't want to travel or I don't want to play like Thags, it is a lot of models to bring and carry and put on a tray. Feyenoord can slip into that and add a couple extra models to my list. But also just being able to be like, this list is completely different than Thags. Like, it's just off the wall. You have to have different tools because Animag and Thags both share the common concept that they're both heavy attrition lists. And so if your anti-attrition list is good at just dealing with that type of meta, then it deals with both of my lists. And if Fayana is in that mix, your opponent has to look at that and go, well, shit, my heavy attrition list doesn't necessarily deal with Fiona too.
Yeah, I mean defense skew because Iona's kind of doing it a bit, and that's like part of where she causes problems. Like if you can't fix Matt, you are going to have problems, right? Like it like she will have a key dodge that will just ruin your day, and Fiona does that in a real serious way.
Yep. Cutter said her crit smite is real great in the meta. James Trevor says, love that the rake is starting to get some love again. Well, you were in the right place if you were looking for rake love.
Can you smell what the rake is cooking?
The two of us together, there was at one point when I was first starting Flight Makes right out with Charles where I was like, man, I really wish I had a second rake. And Charles was like, wait, I didn't send you a second rake. This must be rectified. It must be raketified.
Raketified, for sure. Oh, I love the puns. Yeah, there was a point at the end of Mark II where I had this list that was going to have 5 or 6 rakes in it. It was one of those sad lists that I was like super into the like, this is going to be so crazy, and did not quite get it fully painted before the Mark III announcement.
Whenever we get a synergy caster, synergy rakes are going to be terrifying.
Well, at least we don't have true striking Harriers anymore, so now synergy is at least possible.
Well, and synergy capping at 3 is much more reasonable in Legion. Like +3/+3 in Legion is good. It's reasonable.
Yeah, but honestly, just like having access to a true strike model, like we should not have had synergy in Mark II. Like I know they play tested it on one of our warlocks. I don't remember which one. I think it may have been the twins. But no, synergy for Mark II Legion would have been horrible decision. And that's from a Legion player perspective. I'm like, it wouldn't have been any fun. Don't even roll dice. Stuff just dies. It'd be like playing Menoth.
Well, we can only hope that some of our future casters bring out some goodness. It was really funny. There's one moment of LVO that really stuck out to me in that I was actually finishing up one of my games, and you were standing right behind me, and Hungerford was standing next to you, and I finished. And I turn around, and Hungerford looks at you, and he looks at me, and he says, come and talk to me about Legion at the end of the year. And he just has this like real ominous tone in his voice and kind of gives us that, like the wink and the nod, and then walks away. Doesn't say another fucking word. And I'm just like, okay, well, I'll see you end of the year.
There was a point that I was talking with him, and I'm pretty sure this was a above board, not like a don't fucking mention this on the podcast sort of conversation. But I believe the sentence was something to the effect of, you're going to be real happy by War Machine Weekend.
Yeah.
And so I get the impression that there is some pretty cool Legion stuff that will be hitting potentially like after WTC, but before War Machine Weekend. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be other stuff before that, but just there is some bigger stuff coming in that time period. And one of the other things he was saying at LVO was that every faction's getting some cool shit this year, but it's just not going to come in the way that you expect it to because of the Infernals showing up. Like all of the gods and stuff are getting more involved, and shit's going to get crazy. And the things that are going to be coming in for the different factions are just going to be different than normal. What exactly that means, I don't have any fucking idea. But shit's going to happen. But I think it's going to be different than just like, here's another UA, here's another character beast, right? Shit's going to get weird.
I really hope that Thags 3 makes a deal with an Infernal and just becomes like some soul-eating Everblight god.
See, as much as I think I want Veil 3 more than I want Thagrosh 3.
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth, Mr. Veil.
I think she's due. I think it's time for her like to take it on to another level. Because you can't stick another shard in Thags. He might blow up.
No, he needs to take it out and stick it into Callus, and he'll have like a caster attachment that'll be Thagrosh's body. That's basically like this guard dog ogre that used to have Everblight's shard in it, and then he'll have like the Callus body, but it'll be a full-size dragon, and he's just like Avatar of Everblight.
Yeah, I could see like Callus like I don't know if they'd make him a battle engine caster or like a gargantuan caster or like where you'd go with that, but like be like a dragon.
Yeah.
Like Callus was designed to be able to handle the bigger shards, but being that I've been really excited coming out of LVO, and so I picked up some more models. So I'm trying to like a different wing position for the Nerf that's hopefully a little easier to fit around things. But I wanted the ability to potentially play like 4 Nerfs, so that's happening.
You know,
Finally,
go ahead.
I just finally assembled my Gremlin Swarm so that I'd have access to it.
Oh yeah.
Just I'm like, it's an option. Hasn't been based yet, but I actually was like, I kind of wanted a second War Chief because there was some list where I'm like, that's that's something that I would potentially throw in. I need to get to like actually painting my second and third unit of Warmongers. So there's other lists that I want to be able to have fully painted, so I can potentially play them because I've got a fair amount of list ideas, but I'm always happier when everything's painted. Like there was points with LVO, I just didn't even put the Miss Speaker into list because it was the one thing I brought that wasn't painted, and I was like, I don't want to play unpainted. Ew, gross. No, that's not a slam on people who are playing unpainted armies. I would rather you play the game. So don't think I'm trying to shit on the fact that you haven't painted your army. And some people play more factions, and that's totally okay. I just personally like my army to be painted. I'm not the best painter in the world by any means, but I just have more fun. Like I don't like seeing one of my models as being just like primed black on the table. It frustrates me, and I get less enjoyment out of it. It doesn't bother me quite as much for my opponent, but man, when it's just like there's multiple games at LVO where I was putting down like my blue army and I was playing against like a red or a yellow army. And I was like, oh man, the contrast on this table is so cool. It's like college football shit.
I agree. I play fully painted as well. And it's not for any reason of like snobbery or that like I don't even practice not fully painted. Like if I'm going to play a model, I have to paint it before I'm going to play it, which keeps me very honest with what I'm going to play right now. But it's also a game. Like I like to see all the pieces painted. It's like if I play D&D, I world build. I'm going to build the whole table. I'm going to build all the little pieces and chairs and chests and traps and everything and paint all the models. And so War Machine for me is like being able to translate all of that into a tabletop war game, and I like that. I like that there's the cinematic feel of it all. It's to kind of tangent back into what you were just
like
saying.
Tangent, recycle tangent.
Like, recycle tangent. You brought your Gremlin Swarm out, and it reminded me that there's a Gremlin Swarm on my Feyana list, and I really like having Annoyance in there just to have that extra -1 on there to hit rolls on her feet turn, and I really wanted to squeeze a Harrier in. I'm like, man, the Harrier would be able to benefit from the feet, and it could be super annoying, easy transfer target, but the list was just really light on solos, and I was like, okay, I get best of both worlds because I get the solo, they can go camp flags and be annoying, but it's also, that extra defense debuff. And it I have I don't know necessarily a blight makes right moment, but like a very good feeling about Legion earlier today, and I'll share it at the end of the podcast.
Okay, sounds good. So next thing that you got, next games you're going to play, what are the lists that you're bringing? Are you bringing any of the ones we were talking about today?
Definitely. So I'll be bringing the Thags 1 list with the Shamblers and the Misspeaker because I want to try that. I want to pressure test it. I just love my list. And then my second list.
I'll try that list too. Like I was like not going to play this list, but it's Champions is still a thing. I don't think I'm going to qualify for Iron Gauntlet this year, but I'm going to be in a few, so it's possible. And so there's probably going to be more tournaments. There's a lot of people in the Pacific Northwest qualified for Iron Gauntlet, so I would not be surprised if we have more Champions events before Lock and Load. So there's a strong possibility that I play my Callus list and that Thags list because it looks real tasty.
Well, I'll let you guys know how it goes. And it'll be paired with Primal Terror, so it'll either be Feyana or it'll be Animag just because that's my bae. Mm-hmm. Or maybe one of your lists. You've been cranking out some really interesting looking Primal Terrors lists, and so I'm kind of itching to try something new.
Sounds good. And so one of the things I want the listeners to take away from, first off, we're almost to our first 100 subscribers, which is super cool. We're totally new to this whole YouTube thing. and there's still more things that we want to do as far as what we want to use this channel for, and whether there's going to be like live streamed games and all sorts of stuff that we're going to use the BMR channel for. But building up the subscriber base, you guys like actively see the alerts that we're going to go live and we're going to show you stuff. Super appreciate. So thank you guys for subscribing. But one of the main things, like I was talking about this with Hungerford at LVO, you cannot depend on the CID to like change the meta for you in a positive way. You have to be able to examine the meta and change lists and do different things. And I'm really happy that saying like we're right in the beginning of 2019, and like the list creativity coming out of Legion is fantastic, right? You've got JVM doing the Lilith list with like Croak Raiders and Archangel, right? But you know, JVM is, you know, he's our dude, right? Like, you know, you always expect creativity out of him. You've got Cutter busting out Meyer in the Callus list. Love that, right? Like that's a whole nother option. And like being able to protect Callus behind some clouds, real big deal. So I love that we got that coming out of Legion, right? We've got, you know, my Callus list where I'm like Go Labs and Nerfs and everything. Woohoo! Like they're real good. You've got, you know, you kind of reinvented Thags, right? Like we're talking Shamblers, we're talking Incubi. Like this is stuff that other people weren't doing. This kind of creativity is what's making other people go, I thought Legion was was one of my easy drops. Suddenly this shit's getting real complicated and real hard to deal with. And so keep searching. Like this is not the way things were in Mark II, where all of the lists have been discovered and there's just like 6 or 7 lists that dominate the meta and there isn't anything else that matters. It's not like that anymore. There are so many lists, so many things to factor in. There is shit to discover. It is okay to explore. If you got list ideas, like hit us up. We'll talk lists with you. So, Emanuel, though, you wanted to close us out with some Legion tech.
Not necessarily Legion tech, but I certainly had like a Blight makes right moment, right? So, prepping for this episode, you're like, hey man, I want to talk lists. And I'm like, great, I have some like cool list ideas bouncing around. But prior to this, you had kind of prompted me and been like, all right, so what are you thinking about list after LVO? And I was like, I've been building Crix and Kador lists. And you're like, what is this? What is this nonsense?
Not surprise me. This does not surprise me at all.
Well,
I have no idea what your Kador lists are, though. The Crix does not surprise me at all.
I have some cool Kador lists. But I ended up picking up the Bane Knight Officers and Denny Zero and some other things at LVO. And I was, you know, had that rattling around in my brain for a bit. And you know me, Charles, after all the time we've podcasted, hundreds and hundreds of episodes, hours and hours and hours.
Literally hundreds of episodes.
Yeah.
Hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
500,000+ downloads.
At least. Like, we've been at this for a long time. Like, a lot of our voice.
Around the time that we stopped, it was about 600,000.
Yep. And where we were up to like 300 something in RFP episodes, and not counting RFP Prime and all the RFP tangents that we did, RFP into the arena, all that shit. But anyways, right? So I'm
where you were on like 7 podcasts a week. You're like, I'm on the Circle podcast, I'm on the Menoff podcast, I'm on the Crix podcast. You're like,
and I was producing content for a lot of them too, where like other podcasts were hitting me up and saying, hey, what do you think we should talk about this week? And I'm like, yo, I just answered that question 5 times today for other people.
But, oh man, when not Blightbringers, but Line of Sight was, they're like, hey, any questions that you guys want for your next episode? I just typed up like 8 questions and then I messaged Jade. I'm like, you can fucking ignore every question I typed. I just giving you options, right? Like, yeah. If you need questions, you got them. And like half of them are like funny, like what model should Jaden modify to have Chandler's haircut? And and then, you know, like one of the questions was, so on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is the worst you can be at War Machine and 10 is the best that you can be at War Machine, is Brett Fogel a 12 or a 13?
Nice.
But then I had like more serious questions, like, all right, like if with the way the meta is developing, like what factions are going to be struggling to deal with this? Is, you know, what can they do to try to mitigate that? Which factions are really primed to deal with this and why? You know, a mixture of fun ones and like real tactical ones. So I hope they enjoyed that.
Nice. Love our line of sight family for sure. So anyways, going back to this, I was building a lot of cricks and Kador lists, and I got real hard into the cricks tank. And you know me, as long as we've been doing this, I love attrition. I love recursion. Like, I'm gonna reach for the Scar ones, and I'm gonna put
How can you not play Scar 1? Scar 1's so good.
exactly. Like, I'm gonna throw all the attrition at it. I'm gonna put all the Banes in the list, and I remember at one point looking down at the list and thinking real hard about it and like all the brain power and everything, and I just stop and I go, I should just be playing Thags 1. And I let that wash over me for a second. I'm like, is it that my Crix list isn't as good at recursion attrition as my Legion list? And then I said it out loud, and I've said it a few times on the podcast. Legion is the new Crix. And Claire said, what did you say? And I said, Blight makes right.
Oh, that's too good. That's too good. All right, listeners, thank you guys for tuning in for another live episode of Blight Makes Right. We will have more kitties trying to jump up on my lap mid-episode. That's the thing. But thank you guys for subscribing. We're pushing towards our first 100 mark. We have a lot more content coming out for you guys. Thank you for supporting us. And it's time to close this shit out. So, Blight's out.
Blight's out, baby!